So, for some context, this actually happened to someone named Tony, and he used to be an instructor at a riding stable. Tony was about maybe 17 or something at the time of this story, and this took place back in 2013. Tony had recently had broken up at that time with his now ex-girlfriend due to reasons I will not go into. Tony basically was alone and he really wanted to date someone again. He started looking on stuff like Tinder and that and started doing online dating. As he was doing on some looking at some girls to do online dating with, he looked over to see that there was this really cute girl. This cute girl looked like he was about a year older than Tony, and she started talking with him. The more he started talking to her, the more comfortable he started becoming. He really enjoyed her company, and she introduced herself as Lindsay. Lindsay seemed like a cool girl, and Tony started talking to her. It got to the point at least a few times where she asked him if she would like to meet him up at her place. Of course, Tony agreed, and she sent him the address. When he arrived at the address, though he realized that it was pretty much just a really creepy old house. Tony ended up texting Lindsay saying he just can't make it because he was busy, and ended up driving home. A few days later after that, Lindsay had somehow got his phone number and started texting him. She started texting him saying, "Hi, how are you?" to "you dumbass." She honestly just wouldn't leave Tony alone and kept trying to stalk him, like such as social media like his Facebook, Instagram, etc. It got to the point where Tony ended up just blocking her, and that was the end of it for a while. It turns out at least a few days later, Tony was home alone at that time when his phone rang, and it happened to be Lindsay. Lindsay ended up saying that she is near his place and she will kill him. That really took him off course, and that's when he said that he'd be calling the cops. That's when Tony ended up calling the cops, but however, with him being so far away, it would take a while for the cops to show up. So Tony ended up making sure that the doors were locked and ended up hiding in the bathroom, praying to God and hope Lindsay didn't try to find a way in. Eventually, she broke in through the kitchen window and climbed through. And when she did that, though, she ended up walking around and start looking for Tony. She was saying stuff like, come out, wherever you are, to "I will find you," stuff like that. Obviously, this was just something that was very unexpected, but it was still really creepy. It was at least a few minutes when Lindsay finally came upstairs and was standing right by his bedroom door. She ended up trying to bang it really hard and try to break in. It wasn't until the sirens from a distance were heard, and that breathed a sigh of relief for Tony as the cops arrived and they arrested the girl. But a cop eventually came up to his bedroom and pretty much got Tony out of there. Tony explained the whole ordeal with her, and it turns out that she had been catfishing by luring people into her house where she would murder them. She also had some history of stalking people, and it wasn't the first time she has done it. She was then taken to prison, but eventually she was not released as of this story. Still to this day, though, Tony then learns eventually that online dating isn't really a good idea. He eventually got a girlfriend in 2014, and she had been really nice and awesome with him. Now, Tony has never forgotten what Lindsay tried to do, but knowing that Lindsay was a stalker, that definitely raised a lot of red flags, ones that he should have known sooner. For a bit of context, this actually happened on one of my barn friends. Of course, at the time of the story, we'll call her Grace. Grace was literally 16 years old at the time of this story, and this took place back in 2018. Grace was basically a popular girl, and she had a lot of friends, and she was always on top of her schoolwork, always making sure assignments were in on time, etc. Grace was one of the best students that the school has ever had, ever since I left school. This was around sometime in April of 2018 when Grace happened to be around lunchtime. Her friends were basically gone out to have lunch and forgot to invite her. Now, she was obviously alone, so she honestly didn't even think to do anything much. Then there was this cute guy that showed up, and he introduced himself as Andrew, and Andrew seemed to be a pretty nice guy. They started talking for a bit, and Andrew exchanges his interests with Grace, and Grace seemed to really enjoy his presence. He seemed to be pretty nice, so she really enjoyed it. However, it wasn't until something strange happened. Now, Andrew seemed to chat with her, and they exchanged phone numbers, where Grace had been talking to Andrew a lot. It wasn't until maybe a week later when Grace ended up getting asked some really inappropriate questions by Andrew. Andrew had asked her really inappropriate questions, to which Grace explained to him to please stop doing that, as that was making her really uncomfortable. He apologized and eventually moved on from that, but eventually he went on to the topic of inappropriate questions again. Grace finally had enough, and that's when she ended up blocking his number and also blocking his social medias. She thought that was the end of it, but boy was she wrong. She was asleep in her bed when she ended up waking up to knocks on the window. She looked over to see that it was no one there, and she thought that she saw someone, but she was paranoid and probably just thought she saw something. It wasn't until the next day at school when Andrew had somehow found out her class schedule and was waiting for her outside of the classroom. That's when Grace ended up talking to the teacher about it, and of course he said he would look into it. It got so bad to the point where Grace ended up going to the principal's office and explained about this Andrew guy. She gave the best description of what the stuff he was doing, and the principal said he would look into it. The next day, though, when Grace went back to school, Andrew wasn't there. He wasn't there, and it made her sigh relief, maybe thinking he'd given up. But that was until the principal got on the phone in the classroom and basically said to Grace to pack her stuff and go to the principal's office. Grace ended up going to the principal's office, and when she ends up going to the principal's office, her parents were there as well as a police officer. It turns out that they told her that Andrew had been stalking women for at least 2 years, and eventually it got to the point where he ended up going over to a girl's house where he sexually assaulted them. It was really, really painful to hear, but honestly, Grace was just glad that Andrew was expelled from the school and he was never seen on the property again. Now, I don't even know what Andrew would have done to Grace if Grace had just not told anyone about him. She probably would have met the same fate, but ever since then, she's never seen Andrew again, and she prays to God and hopes that Andrew gets the help that he needs. This was back in 2014, and I was 16 years old at the time of this story. I was still in high school and was in grade 11 at the time of this story. It started out in September, when my dad was at work while my mom was at a friend's house dancing. So I was alone with my brother, who is younger than me. I was on my computer playing a game on Facebook, to which I was enjoying a fun game. However, I can't remember the name of the game I was playing, but it was a Wizard of Oz themed game. While I was on my computer, I was chatting with a few friends on Facebook. Now, I wasn't allowed to get Facebook till July of 2014. It was around the time my mom let me have social media like Facebook. She was paranoid as well as my dad, so they gave me some rules to follow while I have Facebook. These rules are included like don't add people I don't know, only add people I know, etc. I have been following the rules, so my parents weren't concerned about me breaking them. However, they always wanted to make sure that I was okay, since I'm on the autism spectrum. While my mom was dancing, it was on a Friday night, meaning it was the weekend. I was up most of the night. While I was making myself some dinner, I heard the house phone ring, to which it wasn't far from my computer. Now, most of the time the house phone would ring if it's scammers, telemarketers, school, and people looking for my parents. This was before my mom and I had cell phones, so my dad was the only one with a cell phone at the time. I went to answer the phone, thinking it was someone trying to reach out to my dad or mom. However, when I picked up the phone, I saw it was a phone number that I hadn't recognized or knew. "Hello?" I asked on the phone, and waited for a few moments before a voice was heard on the other line. "Hello, Bella. I'm Robin." Now, this man's voice was a Pakistani Indian accent, so I knew he was from either Pakistan or India. First of all, I know my dad knew someone by the name Robin, but he never told me who he was since customers' cars he fixed come and go, so he doesn't keep track of names. Second, on to the first statement, I want to point out, my name isn't Bella. In fact, I first assumed this guy called the wrong number, to which it has happened every once in a while. I said to him on the phone that he must have called the wrong number, since I didn't know who this guy was. He was making me feel uneasy. "Do I know you from somewhere?" I asked. "Yes, I go to the same school as you." As soon as he said that, I knew I was not only unsettled by this, but even more confused. How could he have gone to my school was one question, but another question was how did he manage to get my house phone number? As far as I know, I only gave out my land phone number to my closest friends, though I can trust. However, being a teenager at the time, I went along with it, thinking it was someone from my school. I talked to Robin for a few minutes before my mom called to check up on me. So I said bye to Robin before answering the call from my mom. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon when shit started to go crazy. My dad was always working while my mom was at home doing what stay-at-home moms do. I was only on the computer when Robin called, so I picked up the house phone and started chatting with Robin. While chatting, the conversation started to get very suggestive. He would start flirting with me, to which was really weird, seeing that this Robin person sounded like he was in his 30s. I was uncomfortable by this and told him to stop. However, he wouldn't listen to me and started talking about flirting with me in public. I was a minor at the time, so this made me uncomfortable, especially since I was just over half his age, so something wasn't right. My mom could tell something was wrong, so she stayed and listened to the conversation me and Robin were having. I can tell my mom sensed something was wrong, so Robin and I talked for a minute or two. What he said next not only made disgusted, but was also messed up and made me uncomfortable. "You're my future wife, Bella. I want to see you." As soon as he said that, I hung up the phone, to which my mom, who heard Robin on the phone, saw my distressed look. She had a talk with me about the man on the phone. Then I explained from how it started with the phone calls on Friday, as I thought he was someone from my school. However, my mom really got upset when she heard the man said something about me being his future wife. She said to me that I don't know who he is, so she made a phone call with my dad about the whole incident with Robin talking to me. I wasn't allowed to answer the house phone, so I asked some of my friends on Facebook if they know who Robin is. Most of them said no, as they had no one named Robin as their friend. After my mom got off the phone with my dad, she told me that my dad would call the police to take my statement, as well as my mom's. An officer showed up and took our statement, to which the officer suggested we change our phone number. Now, my parents didn't want to change our phone number because we've known that number for many years, and lots of our friends knew that number. Monday was when the whole school was aware of this Robin guy, to which they would have to make sure I was okay, as well as make sure an officer was near the school front doors. My high school takes stalking of students seriously, so that helped me focus on school so I wouldn't be too scared to be in school. Fast forward to about 5 days later, I was playing on my PC game when my phone rang and my mom picked up the phone. It was the same robbing guy, only this time he gave his name saying James Lockhart, asking me or Bella as he was called me by. The police were called again. However, the numbers of this James or Robin guy were untraceable, so they couldn't track down where the numbers were coming from. After James' fake name was said, I was not allowed to use the house phone at all, unless the phone call was for anyone they knew was looking for me. This went on for at least 2 weeks. However, this is when things started to get a bit extreme. It was near early October, and I was making dinner when the phone rang. My mom answered it, but instead of saying anything, she was quiet. The man on the phone gave another fake name. This time he said his name was Jim. My dad was in the kitchen when he saw my mom not talking on the phone, so he headed for the phone and gave this Jim person a piece of his mind. When my dad picked up the phone, he was angry, and when he replied to Jim on the phone, since he was protecting me, I heard him yell at the top of his lungs on the phone. I could tell he was pissed, but my mom managed to take down another phone number before my dad started ranting on the phone. "Don't you call my daughter again, and don't you dare say flirty shit to her on the phone, you motherfucker!" My dad shouted angrily on the phone. Jim, however, hung up like a chicken, to which the police were called yet again for another report of the stalker harassment I was going through. The phone number my mom wrote down was traceable, so the police were able to track it down. However, since my last stalker called was just early in 2015, however, my mom did not only answer the phone this time. He eventually gave up and stopped calling me, so my parents gave me a talk about how stalkers who are men go after younger girls as young as under 16. I was back to myself sometime in the spring of 2015, so I didn't have to worry about that stalker guy again. It's been 9 years now, and 10 years, and I'm pretty much 26, and I am more careful on who I gave my info to. It's unclear if my stalker has been caught or not, but I would like to think he is in jail for stalking. However, many God knows other girls and women are like me out there. I just hope they don't ever have to I don't have to go through that again. As I have a boyfriend myself and doing a lot better now than how I was. To that stalker, I hope you're rotting in hell for flirting with me on the phone and for stalking me.